Halo 3 ODST may be one of the shorter entries in the series, but it's nonetheless a game packed full of bite-sized chunks of everything that makes Halo so brilliant. Perhaps my favourite bite-sized chunk of them all is the mission NMPD HQ, which takes place around the game's midpoint and tells the story of Buck and Romeo as they attempt to link up with fellow ODSTs Dutch and Mickey, which is exactly what I'm going to be taking a closer look at during this video. Before we really get into the swing of things, here's what happened previously during Halo 3 ODST. The game begins with an ODST squad made up of Buck, Dare, Dutch, Mickey, Romeo, and player character Rookie aboard the UNSC ship Say My Name as they prepare to board a Covenant assault carrier located above the city of New Mombasa. Shortly after, the team begins their descent towards the carrier, but things very quickly go awry. Dare changes their trajectory as part of a secret new mission, and the Covenant ship enters slipspace, at the same time emitting an EMP which prevents the team's drop pods from deploying their parachutes. Rookie is knocked unconscious and awakens some 6 hours later to the grim realisation that he is alone on the streets of New Mombasa, and so sets off to find out what happened to the rest of his squad. And as he continues to explore, Rookie finds a number of clues which give him a better idea of how events played out in the meantime. Buck landed a distance away and began searching for Dare, but could only find her helmet, although he did manage to locate Romeo in the process. Dutch, meanwhile, ended up on a nature reserve and helped Marines fend off the Covenant, and Mickey hopped in a tank and fought his way through the city streets before eventually meeting up with Dutch. Mickey and Dutch then helped defend an Oni base from a Covenant assault before leaving to rendezvous with Buck and Romeo, which is where NMPD HQ begins. The mission kicks off with Buck trying to contact Rookie to no avail before Mickey and Dutch arrive on the scene, although they're quickly forced to retreat by a pair of Banshees.
Welcome aboard, ladies. First stop, anywhere but here. Banshees, on your six. Hit the deck! We're losing her! Watch out! Ah! Mickey, Dutch! Status!
And it's worth noting that Romeo fires precisely 3 shots during this scene, which I'll come back to in just a tick. On the story side of things, I want to quickly highlight the in-mission dialogue during this level, as something I think ODST does quite well is balance its more serious side with its humour. Exploring New Mombasa at night as the Rookie tends to be a very serious affair, while the missions which take place during the day tend to be accompanied by dialogue which is a bit brighter, and NMPD HQ is one of those where I enjoy it most.
Thanks for picking such a tall building. I'm really digging all these stairs.
Do you ever get tired of bitching, Romeo?
You ever get tired of busting my balls?
Point taken.
You take control of Romeo with only 1 bullet remaining in his rifle's chamber, a nice bit of continuity following the opening cutscene, during which Romeo fired the 3 shots I mentioned a moment ago, and what follows is classic Halo. Truth and Reconciliation in Combat Evolved started the trend of most games in the series featuring a mission which begins with a sniper rifle, with 3's the Arc and reaches Nightfall following suit, and ODST is no exception. The mission's level design is perhaps what makes these opening sections stand out compared to the examples I've just listed, in a good way and in a bad way. Let's get the bad out of the way first. Putting the mission's skybox, which is in fairness one of the best in the series, to one side, NMPD HQ does struggle somewhat in terms of aesthetics. Visually, ODST is not the most varied Halo title ever created, and that is certainly evident here. The environment is fairly generic, with little to differentiate individual sections of the map, other than at its end, and I would have liked there to have been a little more going on to help it stand out from the other city locales featured during the campaign. That being said, what I do find more interesting is how the areas are laid out, which does go some way towards helping it stand apart from the other sniper missions in the series I just mentioned. I've always considered ODST to be a more narrow affair on the whole than other Halo titles, and that's certainly the case with NMPD HQ, in keeping with the theme of being an ODST, who are talented soldiers but certainly no Spartans. Battles during the game generally feel like more exhausting brawls, and so it makes sense that even when giving you a sniper rifle, Bungie ensures that encounters still feel more personal than they perhaps do during similar affairs in other Halo games. It's also worth noting that there are a couple of alternative paths which can be used during these opening sections, but because the combat is very in your face and the environments are extremely narrow to begin with, I'd guess many may not have even noticed that they were an option during the ensuing chaos. After topping up your sniper ammo in a lobby where Covenant and UNSC forces had seemingly been involved in a skirmish, you arrive at the third of the mission's sniper segments. There's a very smooth ramp up in difficulty up to this point, which helps events remain engaging. In the first area, you take on grunts and brutes in a narrow environment. In the second, you face the same again, plus the added threat of jackal snipers in a larger area. And now that you've hopefully sharpened your aim, you take on brutes equipped with jetpacks in what I reckon is the most entertaining of the 3 encounters. The next section might take you by surprise somewhat, as you stumble across a large Covenant squad, and a more exciting piece of music kicks in.
Reinforcement! I stuck him! Target down! They took cover!
NMPD HQ uses ODST's soundtrack really well, and this is perhaps my favourite example other than during its conclusion, which we'll get to shortly. The Covenant being much closer to you when entering the area is one sign that you maybe need to fight from close quarters, but I think what really encourages you to ditch the sniper and close the gap between your enemies is the track used, which kicks into gear at just the right moment to signify a transition in combat styles. Once that encounter's done and dusted, you enter the mission's final segment, which is also its best. I find the idea of Romeo, a sniper, being afraid of heights fairly amusing.
That's the bridge? You gotta be kidding me.
And the next few moments spent crossing the makeshift bridge as banshees fly overhead, causing it to shudder every time they do so, are some of the most memorable in the entire game. That's something also true of the mission's final standoff as well, as Romeo and Buck reunite with Dutch and Mickey to fight off wave after wave of Covenant reinforcements flanked by banshees. I think it's fair to say that it's not the most subtle encounter in the series, but it's hard not to be entertained by proceedings. There's more turrets than you can shake a stick at, just begging to be used, and in my view it's the first time in the entire game where it truly feels like you're part of a larger squad. The sheer amount of turrets and other munitions lying around does strike me as a little strange, but given how exciting the encounter ends up being, I think we can grant Bungie a little artistic license in how the sequence is set up. How the battle is framed is also a clever decision on Bungie's part. You could catch glimpses of the devastation caused to the city as you progress through the mission, but here during the final encounter, they make sure there's little to block your view of the destruction, which you'll be looking at a whole lot as banshees draw your attention to what's in the distance. I also mentioned how much I enjoy the music during this mission, and my favourite of all its uses also comes during this set piece. Air Traffic Control, which you can hear playing in the background now, is a fantastic track, and its inclusion here really helps elevate the scene as a whole. It's hard not to find yourself at least a little bit exhilarated, as it plays in the background while you fire rocket after rocket at banshees, phantoms, and occasionally even Covenant ground troops. My comments regarding the soundtrack also apply to the wider game. Like ODST itself, it's certainly different from other titles, but it also fits perfectly with the mood of the title as a whole, and the occasional jazz numbers which are thrown in really make it stand out from anything else in the series. The end of the battle is marked by the appearance of a brute chieftain, and things don't end too well for Romeo.
Get her!
And even during this scene demonstrating the brute's power, there's still time for some of the ODST's trademark banter at the end.
Get this thing off of me!
At which point the mission concludes with Buck promising to get Romeo out of there. To put it simply, NMPD HQ is a very entertaining 20 or so minute romp. ODST's missions have been criticised by some for their length compared to other Halo titles, but in many ways, I think that misses the point. Of course, there's no arguing that they are shorter, but shorter doesn't necessarily mean worse, and that's certainly true when it comes to this mission. The sniper sections at its beginning have a nice ramp up in terms of the skills they require, and everything else that takes place in its final 5 minutes or so are straight out of the Halo top drawer. ODST may be a divisive title and perhaps the most avant-garde of all of the Bungie developed Halos, but missions like NMPD HQ prove without doubt that whether that's the case or not, it's still a game with a tremendous amount to offer. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you enjoyed it, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts. And if you're feeling extra generous, perhaps even supporting me on Patreon. And hopefully, I'll see you all again soon.